Welcome everyone to Stories to Share, the third speaker in our third season. My name is Joe Steinfeld and I am the moderator of this series. How many of you are here for the first time? Welcome. Excellent. I hope you'll come back. In future months, it's the first Friday of each month. And as you can see, our sponsors are Beltetz and the Savings Bank of Walpole. Today, we have a remarkable person as our speaker, a man named Dan Scully. Many of you know Dan. And I spoke with Dan earlier in the week, and I asked him, as I often do, would you do it again? Which is to say, architecture, and he said, yes, I would. And no wonder, because I took a look at his resume, and although I hate cliches, you could choke a horse on this, on this resume. He has become a fixture in this region, and I mention that because you can't turn around in the Monadnock region without running into something that has Dan Scully's imprint. There's a wonderful book called Monadnock Summer, The Architectural Legacy of Dublin, New Hampshire, by William Morgan. I only know about it because my wife, Virginia, insisted that I look at it, and I'm glad I did. It features many of Dan's works, among other things, and he has his imprint not just on Dublin, but throughout the area. One interesting thing I learned from reading about Dan is that he doesn't just dabble. He gets into various areas of architecture in real depth, and he has been recognized. I won't read them all, but there are 36 honors and awards listed in this write-up, many of which are from the American Institute of Architects, and including an award from the New Hampshire branch of the New Hampshire Institute of Architects as basically the outstanding architect of our state. He's been everywhere, but he chose to be and remain here. And so we will hear from him. We will get to see many of his works. We're in for a treat, and think about questions that you'd like to ask, because we will reserve some time for that. It's a pleasure to introduce Dan Scully.
I must admit, it's hard to stand up after that. I don't know what you're expecting. If you're expecting travel with Charlie, we're not going to go very far. We're just going to go around the mountain. Ignoring most of what architecture is about, budgets, clients, all those pieces of architecture. We're not going to solve any affordable housing projects or any of that, those bigger issues. But when Joe asked me to talk, which shocked me, I hadn't thought about even talking, he said, he immediately demanded, what are you going to talk about? And obviously I had no idea because I hadn't thought about it. But it seemed obvious that a good way to sort of sum up some of the work we've done around the mountain as just how to pay homage to the mountain through our buildings. That's sort of where I'd like to start, but architecture is many things, and we're just going to talk a very small piece of it, these are all sites that have had focus on the mountain, and most of our work does not have that opportunity. But and that'll probably be the last of the cars, and probably most of the people who know me expect nothing but cars. And I expect a clicker to work. Is there something, Ed, something I'm meant to do?
You want to aim at the projector.
Thank you. I was very lucky as a 14-year-old, tagged along in Greece when my dad was studying the relationships between temples and the mountains and the temples and the earth. And you could say it all, everything that I'm talking about today sort of relates back to that. This is the Temple of Pestum, Temple to Hera, which a female goddess, and it's so clearly aligned with a female shape in the landscape, and that is what the temples did, because the Greeks believed the gods lived in the mountains, and so they visually tried to connect, and that's what I'm interested in, is the architecture connecting to the landscape, and how you do that. This one is just a very axial connection. It was very interesting that the Greeks also, maybe the shepherds went on the mountains, but the Greeks, most of them didn't, because the gods lived there, and it was, you didn't trod there. It's not working even with the projector. Oh. You know what generation I'm from. There's so many myths that are, and cultures that have been around the mountains. Machu Picchu, their creation myth is that they were born in a cave, on a mountain, on an island, in a lake. And the site does much of recreating that. And the architecture is really a tribute to that, making that connection, making that homage to in the landscape. Right up there, that works. The Aztecs had exactly the same creation myth, in a cave, born in a cave, on a mountain, on an island, in a lake. And Lake Titicaca, which becomes Mexico City, is a lake with an island, and in the middle, they created man-made mountains. And their way of doing homage to that was to architecturally connect and imitate the landscape. This is the island in the middle of that lake. There are so many cultures that are built around the sanctuary, the homage to mountains. And this is, you can see Buddhism, the many religions have find that as an object that's culturally important to them. I asked a Buddhist monk about that mountain, and he said, we don't go up that mountain, we go around it. And our ceremony is to go around the mountain. Again, you don't go there. always a generational problem. This is Fuji and Etna. An Everest Sherpa said, "In every mountain there is a goddess, and it is our responsibility to keep the goddess happy. Months before I start an ascent, I start worshiping it and ask for forgiveness, because I will have to put my feet on her body." I'm going to spend more time with this clicker. It's a very curious that the shape of Monadnock is almost the same as the shape of Fuji. And one of Jaffrey's treasures is Chris Myatt, and this is his painting of Monadnock. The Abenaki Indians felt the evil spirits and the storms were gathered on the mountain, and terror and respect they had terror and respect for the weather gods. They revered the mountain also by staying away, by ceremoniously proceeding around it. It must be more of a trick than I've got. Ed, can you when I just nod, can you advance them? A little fast. This is most of the views we've shown. The Chris Myatt's is from the south side, and this is from the north side. Most of what I will show you are projects from the north side, from the Dublin side. Before getting into that, what's important to me is back to that first Greek slide, and that is how to move your eye, how to connect from things that are larger than yourself to the landscape. These are two examples of projects we've done where the building actually warps in plane, and that helps your eye move. This was actually a tribute to a lost partner. There were two pilots who lived here, and one of them didn't make it back once, and so I did addition tribute, like the two planes just veering off in their own directions. And many of you have probably seen the Petrofina, where, now it advanced. Anyway, the Petrofina arch that, yeah, right, this is fine. Okay, next one. One way you move your eye is to have a focus, and that is an axial direction through a building. Some of you may remember the version I did of the Sharon Arts Center, where the gallery was on Grove Street, but we opened it right up through the Sharon Arts shop all the way out to Depot Square, so that when you came in, the light of the other side drew you in. So this colonnade led you through, whether it was in section or down, but it was all that moving through. Okay, thank you. An early project was an addition to the Nelson School, and I really liked the single gable of the old classroom. No windows, no nothing, a very abstract gable. And they had in the 50s an addition on the left, and the addition we had to do was a whole lot bigger, so it actually was set up an imbalanced condition. And one way you make an imbalanced condition feel more balanced is to have it feel like it's moving. So it took on the form of the little engine it could, and with a few round windows, and it became a dynamic train car moving through. Next. There was a big town meeting about whether to vote this in or not, and it went up and down in terms of the emotions. And Phil Gerasi, who some of you may remember, was a toy maker, and he said, "We don't have a train; it's just passing through." So he got the idea just right. I like this image here of which basically, to make something dynamic, it has to be in contrast to something that's static. And so this Houston station in London sort of embodies both. One, too many, okay. The last of the vehicular images here, probably our best building is in Bellows Falls. It's a visitor center. And if you know Bellows Falls, there's a wonderful Main Street court. There are two streets that converge and come together to make a dynamic center. And we were asked to do an interpretive center for Bellows Falls. So we took that same geometry and used it as one axis being the train and the other axis being the river, with the bridge, recreating the arch bridge that New Hampshire had torn down. They never let me forget that. New Hampshire had torn it down. So it starts out as a snowplow train and morphs its way into train station. Probably what's most important about this project was that, and is what's I really like to do with architecture, is do something that has some meaning. And this brought back the history of the town. They had the money for the building, but they didn't have the money for the arch. They would not let it go. This is a threadbare town, and they insisted on finding the money to do the arch, because that's what really brought back the history. And it's so important to them, it made the telephone book. A little farther afield, we're not at Monadnock yet. The University of Michigan, some of you may know, they're very serious about their football. They're also very serious about their marching band for the football. So they have their own dedicated field, full-size field, and they needed a conductor's platform the thing I really liked about what the marching band does, I don't care about the formations. I like the way the transition between the formations, when they just sort of all meld to become something else. So the frame for ours is sort of that dynamic, unresolved moments in between the transitions. Turned out our biggest problem was this was the symbol of the University of Michigan, and it wasn't given to me as the original problem, but then it became the problem is how to protect that when the University of Ohio came. Back one, sorry. When we all think of LAs, we tend to think of something like this, Italian, LA, and LA, again, or axis has a destination from the entrance to the house. We did a building for the College of the Atlantic, and being about the Atlantic, we set it up on a site that you could approach the building, but go through it. The building was entirely open in the center. You got up to the center and you saw the Atlantic Ocean. And that's really sort of a takeoff from the casino in Narragansett where you drive through. A whole nother talk is that I sort of a fascination of buildings along the road and how the road actually goes through. But thankfully, the road doesn't go through Monadnock. This is a visitor center we did in Englewood, New Jersey. And it was in Englewood, they had, a developer had bought a lot of land and carved out all the roads through the woods. And then the project didn't go through, so all the roads were ghosted in. And we had the building straddle one of the roads. So the road went right through the building, the path went through the building. So the building really was the gateway to the nature center. So you went through the building, again, you saw your way through. The angle was because it was a solar building and it was oriented toward the sun. But that's one of the things I like about the opening of building through the building as a gateway is that it's to lead you somewhere else. It's not the building isn't necessarily the destination. Next. This was a small cottage on Granite Lake, and the owners wanted to build a new addition to that and a garage. And so I used, you come down the driveway, you sort of bounce off the garage, and you see into the house and see through the house to the lake. Oh. I'm trying to go backwards here. And this is the house where there's a walkway right through the house. And it was even the curve was to bring you in, lead you into that. Another house, just before we get to Monadnock, is in Hancock. And it was a log cabin house built in the 40s. And we were asked to do a big addition, guest rooms, master bedroom upstairs, a study, and a screen porch. And there was actually a shed on that building, and we used that shed as like the pearl that set up all the other geometry. But you came down about a half-mile long road through the woods, bouncing off rocks all the way. It just was, and the final rock you bounced off of, you turned, and then there was a straight view. We created a view out toward the lake Newbanoosuc. So the beginning of that view is we did 2 big chimneys for the studio and for the master bedroom, all of which were flanking the view out toward the water. And along the way, the destination was the water, but along the way, the screen porch was at the diagonal axis through the site created the geometry of the Lincoln log screen porch. Not far better than anything we do, or a couple examples I like to show from Cornish. Charles Platt. This is one of the great houses called High Court, and the road is out here, and the driveway comes in, and leads you, and you're not sure where, and you see this house up on the top of the hill, but you don't know that's where you're going. And then the road turns, and you go through a birch alley, and you still don't know where you're going. And you get to the end of the drive, this part of the driveway, and you abruptly turned and put on this strong axis right toward the building, right through the building. So the building your eye is led right through to the Connecticut River on the other side. Just a masterful piece of, sorry for the expression, but it's architectural foreplay of how to approach a building. A little closer to home, and this one actually hurts a little bit. This was a scheme in 1983 for Jaffrey, for your memorial park, to the Vietnam and War Memorial, with all your lifeblood has, in a memorial, it's all about the loss of the lifeblood and how it went through the mills and left. And as for the park, we tried to do the foundations of a cathedral and axially connect those. So visually, again, the connection was being made across space. And the benches be the foundations of the cathedral. It's just so it's all very low and very flat to the ground. Unfortunately, it was deemed to be not country enough. Okay, speaking of dreaming of Monadnock, this is sort of a dreamy view of Monadnock. So how do you pay homage to the architecturally? This is probably the weakest of examples, but it's an initial one. This is more imitation. So there's the mountain. We did a house facing the mountain that had 3 ridges, and the top ridge is the one with the stone. The highest part of Monadnock is, as you know, just stone. But it's an interesting question about how you approach the mountain. Today we climb the mountain. We search out views for, is it our ocean? Is it the excitement of something constantly changing with the weather? It's welcoming and soft, and also gathering dark clouds. Is it the power beyond the mountain, much like the power of imagination with the ocean? I don't have the answers for any of that. Another imitation of the mountain. This is a house, I think it's on the Jaffrey Dublin line, that faces directly toward the mountain. It's a very thin house. It's more a big flat facade, and but it's copying the shape of the mountain and paying respects to it that way. And again, you approach through, and then this one you approach through and you see the mountain. So there's nothing subtle about it, it's just there. Another house that actually has a straight view through the mountain, but much more respectful of the heritage of this area. Was a house for Alexa Thayer, who's here. The front porch is actually the same geometry as the front porch of the Dublin Town Hall. And while this house was being designed, the Great Moon window at Loon Point was being torn down. So the house is a rectangular plan, but it just, the site suggested it be laid out this way, but the view to the mountains that way, so that angle of the view became sort of the one contrary thing in the house, sort of an angle that made you conscious of looking that way. And here's that front porch. It's very much like the center of the Dublin Town Hall porch. And here's the recreation of the moon window, a similar recreation of the moon window that was at Loon Point. So on the front of the house, you get the clue of that shape that reads right through the house to the mountain. I always liked the scale of this being much like the tribute to Isaac Newton's view of the world. This is a Harrisville house that was lined up. Actually, there had been a house in this orientation before. That house before had an L shape. We spread out the house, the new house, and so it's facing directly the mountain, but the entrance was all aligned. When you came in the driveway, you saw right through the house and out to the peak of the mountain. And the Italianate shape of the house had this one anomaly that sort of led your eye to the entrance and through. So I sort of liked that reinforcing that through. It's not quite our street that goes through, but like that. Another, this was a Dublin house. Big field facing the mountain. Whoop. Go back. And every effort made to frame that view. But as you approach the house, there is the mountain. So it becomes, you know before you got into the house that this is about the mountain. And so the entrance to the house leads you, the house is wide, so you're not seeing the mountain when you're actually approaching the house. But the entrance sort of embraces you to bring you into the house, and you get a clue of the light on the other side. So in plan, you open the front door, the recessed entrance, and a view out through to the mountain. So there's a repeating shape that carries you through the entranceway to the view to the mountain. This is a renovation of a house in Dublin. Well, you can see the screen porch is being changed in nature, and the shape, the materials of the house are much more classic old Monadnock region shingle style house. And on that one, we did a lot to reinforce the entranceway to, again, for that view straight through. There were things built in this area that we took out, so it goes right through. And the porch and the mountain. This one is very close in on the mountain, but you approached it from the south, so you weren't looking at the mountain at all. And the view to the mountain you achieved after you got in the house. And what the owners wanted to do was to reverse the entrance, have the entrance come in this way, and have us renovate the back of the house into a new front entrance. So that, and so again, we took out some pieces in the house so you could see straight through. So as you're coming up the driveway now, you see the entrance to the house and you see the mountain at the same time. This is in Temple, and it was a 1700s cape, a pre-revolutionary cape, and they wanted to do an addition, and the addition sort of angles toward the mountain. You'll see in plan, but I like to think of this as a Frank Lloyd Wright kind of design. Frank Lloyd Wright came a courting a pre-revolutionary maiden. So here's that original house and the addition, and the addition here and addition here, and it created a courtyard in the middle, and that has a pergola. All of the overlays of the pergola are facing the mountain. So it leads your eye toward the mountain rather than across it. And up on Pac Monadnock, you've got a kind of equal relationship with the mountain. And this house, we tried to, the garage takes on the shape of the mountain. The porte cochere is taking on it. The house shape is taking on the shape of the mountain. And you come in the front entrance, and wait a minute, you don't get the mountain right away. You get denied for a moment. You get the entranceway, the stair upstairs. You come in and you have to make a decision which way to go. And then there's two routes to the view. And they each lead through. You get an idea how big that fireplace is. A person can stand in it. Another where the punchline is given before you get there is on this site. You're obviously, as you approach it, you're very well aware of the mountain, and the site is all beautifully cleared to the mountain. But again, the house is sort of wide, so you're denied the mountain momentarily as you approach it. And a real classic Monadnock region shingle style house. But when you come in, you're confronted by a wall, just like on that previous scheme, and you have to go either side. So there's a momentary denial of the view, and then by the time you go around either side, it's overpowering. It's there. This is the back of the house. Back to Cornish a little bit. there are a couple of interesting houses there that have a, you could say, a more relaxed relationship to the mountain. This is St. Gaudens' house. I just love the way this tree and that thing works. But this is the screen porch. This is the porch. It's actually this is our St. Gaudens Memorial Board meetings. I always sit on this side so I can get this view of everybody and the mountain. And the mountain's off to the side. The Scutney's off to the side. It's clearly a part of the composition, but the porch is not facing the mountain. Clicker. Clicker. Trying to go backwards. This is also by Charles Platt in Cornish, and it's a very Italianate house, and a fairly formal open porch, and that faces directly down the valley. And over to the side here is a Scutney. And actually, the Platts are were very upset a couple years ago when a storm took down most of the trees they had. That was a kind of veil for the mountain, in a way special because it was behind the veil. So the mountain's off to the side when there's a strong axis toward the valley, which is the long view. Sandy James designed a house in Dublin in 1953, a good modernist house that has probably a 300-degree view, and it's mostly about the view to Boston. But oh, by the way, over on my shoulder, there's this mountain, and it's again a very relaxed relationship with the mountain. Off to the side, but it's very much a part of the composition of the house. Also in Dublin, at Tiadnock, this is a great old house, had a recessed porch, recessed deck, and we were asked to make a pergola out of that and formalize it and do some stairs. It was high up above the ground. So we did some stairs, but we flared them toward the view to the mountain, where the main thing here was a view that straight out, which is a view to the valley. So that's the pergola we did with the stairs going up. You can see how they're angled, and off to the side is the mountain. I sure like to read something that Twain spent a lot of time at this house, and I can't imitate his diction. Here's that house with the orientation again toward the long view, and the mountain is a part of it, but it's not in your face all the time. You can probably read this as well as I can, but let me read it. Twain said, "Soaring double hump rises into the sky on its left elbow." Same thing. That is to say, it is close at hand. From the base of the long slant of the mountain, the valley spreads away to the circling frame of hills. And beyond the frame, the billowing sweep of remote great ranges rise and view and flow fold upon fold, wave upon wave, soft and blue, out and unworldly to the horizon 50 miles away. So I think with that, we could. Clicker. Have a drink to the mountain. Yeah, well, somebody said Aldworth, so they got it right. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone, and I want to mention.
Uh-oh, Rusty.
Quite a number of people are joining us online, and if any of those viewers have some questions, please put them on the chat line, and Ed, you'll give me a signal. Go ahead, son.
Your voice will carry anywhere, Rusty.
Dan, the last 10 years or so, I've noticed that because of global warming, the forest is growing several feet a year, and it's starting to fill in your
Yep.
views of the mountain.
Beyond my control.
We all have things against taking down trees.
Right.
But is that interfering with your architectural concept for the future? I'm thinking of a house like Alexa Fair's where the
Yeah.
forest is just barely, the top of the mountain is barely visible, all the rest of it is big blocks by trees that nobody wants to take down.
I don't know how to help. I mean, global warming is, we all wish we had some clue to it. But the trees have always been growing there. And actually what I didn't get into at all, and I wished I had in this many years of this business, is the garden design. And it's how what you carve out of the woods. And all this about an axial view through, you want it to lead out across the landscape. You want the gardens to follow, I want the gardens to follow that. I've had very little chance to do that. A lot of the Dublin big estates that we've renovated over the years, they've all begged to have the gardens restored at the same time. And that hasn't been the focus that I've been giving any involvement with. But you're true, things are.
Yes, speak loudly, please.
So Dan, your very first slide sort of addressed the question I was going to ask you, but I'll ask it anyway. When you were 14 and went to Greece with your dad,
Yeah.
what was it like for you as a 14-year-old to see all of those spaces and the buildings?
One always has something of complication in dealing with your parents. And I had a camera, and he had a camera, and I insisted he stop every time we saw my first Mercedes 300 SL or something like that. That's what I was interested in. But it was my way of finding my own thing. But in reality, people ask me one reason I'm an architect. I think at 14 I felt the power of the Parthenon, and when you feel that power, you have to deal with it. And I think I'm trying to deal with it still. So it was very influential for me, and that connecting to the landscape is what I think is very crucial. You don't always get a chance to do it, but, so, you know, I learned from him, and I also fought him, which is what you have to do when you're growing up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dan, in your presentation, I got thinking, are you a building architect or are you a landscape architect in the old classic homestead design? How would you put yourself?
I would like to have more Olmsted in me than I have. I do buildings, and that's all I'm,
Yeah, with a
that's,
view of-
that's all what I'm hired to do. So but I try and make it connect to the landscape in a way that, I'd be honored to work with, you know, someone like Olmsted who was taking it further into the landscape. But, and my visions often are just beyond the building itself, because it's a path to something else, and I'm trying to connect that. But,
I like your connection in that you're not concerned about gardens. He wasn't either.
yeah, yeah,
It was the visual
yeah,
and scenic presentation to create
yeah,
almost a spiritual
Yeah.
mystery of the landscape.
right.
Yeah.
I'm weak in garden design. I mean, I would like to know more about it, but I don't.
Yes.
Who wants to weed them?
Who wants to maintain a house either?
Yeah.
So,
I noticed in quite a few of your wonderful designs that you use high, small, square, or rectangle windows. And it reminded me of Frank Lloyd Wright, of course, because of his houses. But my question to you is, what did those windows mean to you, both as an exterior and as an interior design?
A lot of design of an elevation is reflective of what's happening inside the building and some of how it looks on the outside. And it's all a visual composition you're trying to make that creates a working order. I mean, I can think of one house where there's a low window at the end of the hall, and then there's a high window over the bed. You know, it's working for how that room is working. But also, that was considered on how it worked on the outside. There's a symmetry that was happening with that. Frank Lloyd Wright is a big influence. I wish that of the buildings I had to do around here, I love the fact that the shingle style is very appealing to me as a design, and it's very appropriate for this region. I would like to have had people more interested in doing more modern things, and that's happening more and more now. But Frank Lloyd Wright is, you know, was formative for me, among a lot of other people. He was never my obsession, but yeah.
Yes.
So, amazing ideas, right? All these ideas for each project. Like, how do those ideas come to you in your process, Dan? Like, do you drive up to a school and say they need a train? Or is it instantaneous? Does it take months to labor over the ideas, or are they like miracles that happen the second you arrive? How does your idea process work?
The question, I think, is where do you get all those ideas?
They are basically from a lot of work. I mean, like the Munsonville School. You don't know that it's going to be a big piece that way compared to the little pieces there where we could even put the building on that site and leave their playground area and stuff, all those pieces. So it was a big site planning project. There was a hill right behind, you couldn't go further back, you had to leave area in the front. It all started to diagrammatically come together, but you have to analyze what's happening in those rooms. What's actually generating much of that was there was found a way through the codes to have, which most schools you can't have windows between the classroom and the hall for fire reasons. But we did the big windows on the front, windows in the hall into the classrooms, because we could put exits out each of those classrooms to the back, so that in case of fire, there was an escape from each room. That then freed up the chance to do that design, and also to encourage them being a line of them. But some things come intuitively, but most of them are a struggle.
Anyone online? I have a question that is prompted by what you just said about school architecture in modern times and how your thinking has changed as schools have become less safe.
Speaking of the Munsonville School, that was designed in 1990, or built in 1990. We've been back a couple times, was to do a larger kitchen and things like that. But one specific request was to come back and look at the safety of it. Where would the refuge areas be in every classroom? So we made some changes, but we identified what would be the refuge areas. And it was a specific task that this modern times requires. So doing a new school, that would have been in the program at this time.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to point out that our next, actually I got a call today from George Santos. He was available, but I told him we were already full. And Mary Islin, if you go upstairs, you can find 16 paintings by her, not just sheep, wonderful paintings. She will be here first Friday of January, a good way to start the year, and we will continue with stories to share. Again, thanks to our sponsors, thanks to Laura Adams, our new executive director, and this is David Beltet, who is the chairman of the board of the Jaffrey Civic Center.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. On behalf of the Jaffrey Civic Center and to Dan, I have a gift, a token of our appreciation. I'll come around after to give it to you. But thank you very much for coming, and I hope you return for some of our other shows.
And I hope you will stay for a glass of wine, a bite to eat, chat with Dan Scully, and we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.